Perfect. So today we have Rob Gonzalez as our podcast guest, and I'm very, very happy and honored to have you as our guest, Rob. He's the co-founder of a very fast-growing company that he's going to talk about in a second. So yeah, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Before we dive into the professional side of our podcast, let me ask you two personal questions. Where are you right now? Where are you living?
I am living in the Berkshires in Massachusetts in the United States. The Berkshires are wonderful, beautiful hills. It's very country, very rural, and I'm enjoying it very much.
So is it winter there right now?
It is winter. I'm looking out the window right now. It's covered with snow.
Perfect. Can you go skiing?
You can close to here. We've had some mixed rainy days over the last couple weeks, so the snow that was on the mountains and skiables is pretty icy right now, but in the next week or two, all the mountains will be open.
Perfect. So it almost looks like in my background here. I have some snowy mountains in my background. Perfect. Thanks a lot for that one. What do you love to do outside of work?
Outside of work, I've got two little kids. They're 4 years old and now 1 year old. So they take a lot of my time. And then when I get free moments, I exercise and I read. And that's pretty much it.
What kind of exercise do you do?
I believe in weightlifting and high intensity interval training. So I'll mix those two every day.
Mm-hmm. That's efficient. Very cool. And what do you love reading?
It's a whole mixed bag. I mean, traditionally, I love science fiction, big science fiction fan. But these days, it's a mix of a lot of nonfiction. So I'm reading Coming into the Country by John McPhee, who's my favorite long form narrative nonfiction writer. I'm reading a book that's a collection of essays from Derek Sivers, who I love. I'm reading a collection of nonfiction essays curated by Ira Glass, the host of This American Life podcast. I'm reading a book on how to take effective notes that walks through a system invented by a German PhD researcher that was highly productive in his lifetime. That is called the Zeitkasten. And it's just a wide range of books on a wide range of topics. I generally am reading at any given time about 10 or 12 books. And when I sit down, I'll pick the one that I'm most interested in and read 20, 30 pages and put it down. I might pick another one up and read 10, 20 pages and just go from there.
I absolutely can relate to that. I do the same, and my wife tells me, "You are nuts. Why do you do that?" So that's good. So now tell me about the company you co-founded. What is Salsify doing?
Salsify was founded by me and two co-founders in 2012 in September. We founded the company to help brand manufacturers win on the digital shelf. The three of us came from a company called Endeca Technologies, which invented search for e-commerce and was ultimately bought by Oracle for over $1 billion in 2011. And we really wanted to do something else that was in e-commerce. And our observation was that manufacturers hadn't really been investing that much in digital. Retailers had, like Walmart or Target or Home Depot, had been investing millions of dollars on their e-commerce presence, on delivery logistics. I mean, even back in 2011 and 12, they were already along the e-commerce journey. But you think of like a Coca-Cola or a Levi's or a Mars or a L'Oreal or a Bosch or manufacturers like those, they weren't really digital back then. E-commerce sales on Amazon and other channels was really a tiny part of their business. The vast majority of their business was still in store. The vast majority of their marketing was still through traditional channels like television. Digital advertising, as in through like Amazon advertising and whatnot, hasn't really been on the rise. So we founded the company to help them make that transition to digital, to help them build the digital DNA. And ultimately went online. And that's what we've been doing the last 8.5 years.
Okay, amazing. And really interesting and crazy trip. You can just see by the amount of funding you raised. I mean, it gets more and more. So you must be growing faster and faster. Interesting ride you must be on.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I mean, it's funny. We started the business and there's a certain amount of just I don't know, risk that you have to take in doing it, because the vast majority of the companies fail. My expectation was that I believed that we were right about the market, but you can always be wrong about the timing, or you could always mess up in the product. And so our thought was, well, let's try this out, and maybe it'll work and it'll be awesome, and maybe it won't, and we'll just go get regular jobs. Now we're 8.5 years on. We've raised over $250 million. We've got deployments in over 80 countries. Our biggest customers, like a L'Oreal or a Mars, have us deployed all over the world. We work with brands in almost every single industry that you can think of. It's been an amazing journey. We've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a topic we could have a totally separate podcast about, but let's stick to us here right now. What is your job at Salsify right now?
My job right now is I am the Chief Marketing Officer of the company.
Okay. So you're responsible to bring in, or let's ask openly, what is your responsibility? Because sometimes, I mean, it's generally clear what a CMO is doing, but it differs from company to company. So what are you exactly responsible for at Salsify?
So at a very high level, the way that I think about as a founder who's a CMO, we're creating a category. We're creating a new type of software product that did not exist before Salsify. And just like Salesforce created, cloud computing, cloud applications, or HubSpot and Marketo created marketing automation. We're creating a new category of software. We're calling it commerce experience management. And so in doing that, for us, marketing has a particularly important role, which is to define the category through thought leadership and through community development. We've got to actually create really, really compelling content that moves the industry and inspires people and helps support the champions that are trying to do the digital transformation within their companies that we know is important and we know is possible. So first and foremost, something that we do that I think maybe not every company would invest as highly in is thought leadership for category definition and creation. So I've got a large corporate marketing team that builds content, and we've got our corporate banner of Salsify that we put a lot of content out. We also have a spin-off organization called the Digital Shelf Institute, which is a community that involves people that aren't even our customers, to give them a space to come together and share insights, share ideas, and we publish reports and thought leadership under that banner. So that's one thing that we do. Another thing that we do, obviously, is the revenue marketing, which is common among most B2B companies. This is demand generation and pipeline development and things like that. Our revenue marketing team partners very closely with sales. And actually, the way that we measure them is not just in the handing over the leads to sales, but in are the leads that we're developing actually turning into qualified pipeline that converts. So the revenue marketing organization isn't involved at the top of the funnel. It's actually involved throughout the funnel, and is measured on not just volume, but also conversion rates through it. And that team also includes our teleprospecting team, the XDR organization that does cold calling and inbound processing and whatnot. Then we've got product marketing. And finally, a new function that we're investing heavily in is community. I think that community is going to be the core of successful marketing in the next 10 years.
Amazing. Thanks a lot for this very short, insightful overview. Now let's do a little thought game. Imagine you're the new sales and marketing leader of a company, and you found product market fit in your niche. What would you focus on first to scale fast?
Well, for me, not all customers are created equal. And, if you've really just found product market fit, and certainly this is true for Salsify, right? In the early days, we started the company near the end of 2012. We had a product that was sellable by April, I think, is when we had our first paying customer, paying us at that time $99 a month. And so it took us about 6-7 months to get the product even in market. And then by the end of the year, we had some more customers, and then obviously it would grow and grow and grow. But for years, the customers were signing on board to a product that hadn't been in market that long, that hadn't had that much development into it, and that had gaps. And we were first in our space, and so they were willing to give us a break on gaps in the product. They were willing to give us a break on bugs in the product and inefficiencies in the product. And so my view is the first thing that companies should do when they find product market fit is to really zero in on who their best customers are that are going to be the most forgiving of the gaps, and try to find more people like that. Can you figure out what those people have in common? I think that a lot of companies have this tendency to try to target everyone who will eventually possibly be their customer with their marketing efforts, with their outreach efforts, with those types of things. And that's a good way to get a lot of unhappy customers early, right? So that's my number one piece of advice is the more intentional you can be about who your best possible customers are, who's the wedge in the market that you can really form a nice community of loyal followers around. That's the place that you should focus as a marketer to start off with.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And if you think about the marketing funnel, the classic marketing funnel where you focus on the one hand of generating leads, and on the other hand of driving those leads from top to bottom, what would you focus on more?
The number one thing, I think that good marketing for me is quality interactions. Seth Godin says this, right? Good marketing is generous. Good marketing is a give, not a get. And where I think that marketing can focus anywhere throughout the funnel is in teaching and education. If you've got a product out there that adds value, if you've got a view of the world that you believe is true and that can be helpful to your customers, then the more that you give in terms of writing that down, in terms of instruction, in terms of thought leadership, in terms of education, in terms of challenging your customers to be better and challenging them to think about the future, the more helpful you are. And so when I think about driving throughout the entire funnel, companies these days are not just looking to transact and to buy something and have the seller walk away. More and more these days, they're signing up for long-term relationships, whether it's software as a service or long-term alliances and whatnot. And so this idea that you're educating and you're adding value throughout the entire sales cycle is a signal that you care about them, that you're going to be with them on the journey, that they're signing up for you not just for this transaction, but for years, and that you're both going to be growing together during that period of time. So my view here is if you're thinking about driving throughout the entire funnel, think about what's actually going to be useful to them, and test that. Create content, create collateral, deliver it, get their feedback, ask them if it was useful or not, ask them if they forwarded it along. Find out what are the things that have value. And the more that you can create that's generous, the more that you can create that's a give, the more that you can create where even if the deal doesn't work out, they remember you and they think, man, those people were smart, or those people were great, or those people added value in my life. Then in the long term, you guys will win.
Can you give us a hands-on example on that just pops up your mind, maybe how you create and test new content that you came up with?
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example first of content that adds value,
Mm-hmm.
and then I'll tell you how we test it. I mean, so
Yeah.
we created a data team at Salsify run by my co-founder, Jeremy, who's our chief data officer. And one of the things that they've been doing is creating a data lake of information across all of retail and manufacturing. So we have access to a crazy amount of data of anything that happens online, a lot of things that happen offline, across millions of products all over the world. And that information is extremely valuable and can offer insight to folks that are in the market. And so one of the things that we've done is we created a tool where an SDR can go into the data lake and get products graded for a company they want to reach out to, so that when they reach out, they can say, hey, look, we've looked at your products on Amazon and Walmart and Target and or Home Depot or wherever they happen to sell, and we found some issues with your products. You know, here's your products. Here's the issues that we found. Here's your competitors' products as compared to your products and the things that they're doing well. And you know, here you go. And at the end of the day, like, you know, we want to be able to work with the companies that we're reaching out to, but even if we don't, that value that we've added, we've put in work there. They can take those emails and they can bring them internally and they could make changes to their product pages and they could grow as a business. And we've helped them do that, even if they're not doing business with us, right? So that's an example of what I mean by being generous. It's like we're putting in work there up front to add value before anything else happens. And the way that we can test whether or not something like this works is very mathematical in our case. I mean, it might be, it's a little harder if you're early stage, but in our case, we've got a relatively large SDR organization. We've got thousands of accounts that we reach out to. And numerically, we can see what types of outreach get responses and are open and whether they progress or not. So what we'll do is we'll create something like that. We'll launch it to a subset of accounts, and we'll see whether or not the response rate in those accounts is higher than other places, right? So you can use something like that at the top of the funnel. In the middle of the funnel, it tends to be more presentation oriented. So by the time you're in the middle of the funnel, you built the relationship. You should be developing or have developed a champion within the company, and you know, we'll sometimes ask them like, "Hey, was that thing that we sent you valuable? You know, did you send it along, right?" And you know, not everyone will give you the direct feedback. Not everyone has that type of personality, but enough of them do that you can actually hear from people what they thought they would, they'd like you to do better. Another thing that we've done is, I talked about community earlier. We created an executive forum under the Digital Shelf Institute, which has 100 senior executive at $1 billion plus manufacturers that are in charge of digital that get together at least once a month. And what we can ask those people, is this a useful piece of content or not? Was this something that you would share with your teams? And there are communities, so they'll tell us straight up if it's crap. They'll say, no, this is awful, like this, or yes, this is amazing. Could you change this, or do you have this other data, or here's something that I would like to see, and they give us direct feedback. So by having that community, it gives us a chance to iterate in a safe space before actually testing it out in the market. So that's a long answer, right? Both in terms of giving an example of what a generous piece of content or give could be, and then also different ways that we actively test those types of things in market.
I love it because it's different than the usual cold outreach that you see nowadays, which is you directly see it's a mass email. Some little variables are exchanged, maybe hopefully your name, maybe your company name, and that's mainly it. And what you do is highly personalized. So someone takes the time, looks at what you're selling on which channel, gives you hands-on insights and data points, even to your competitors and about your competitors. So that must be resulting in much higher conversion rates, I assume. Can you give like a order of magnitude in how much better this converts if you ever tried the usual way of mass emailing people, for example?
Yeah, well, we had I will say a few years ago we were doing the mass email approach. I mean, it's an easy thing to stand up. You know, there's technology that makes it easy, right? Like you buy a list, you get software, you put SDRs on it, and you just blast away. And especially if you've got a relatively poor SDR leader, where the emails that are going out are the same type of crap emails, like, hey, we're Salsify. We reached out to you because we saw that you run digital at whatever company. You know, we help companies like Johnson & Johnson and L'Oreal, and here's conversion rate improvements. And would you like to talk to us? Can we have 15 minutes? It's that exact, you know, that's the crap emails that we were sending and that every other company in the world sends. So what we could see with that email and then throughout the funnel was a real decay in pipeline conversion rates as as we scaled and as we were reaching out to more companies. I mean, earlier on, you say you just reached product market fit, and I said, well, then focus on your best customers. If you're a small business and you're just getting started, your conversion rates often will look high because the people that are desperate for your solution are easy to convert, right? The people that, in like Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm example, the people that are the later adopters are harder to convert. They need more proof. They're not necessarily looking for a solution, and so when you start moving across the adoption lifecycle from the visionaries who are willing to try you out to the people that are more early adopters and then late adopters, your conversion rates are going to plummet unless you're doing smart things to fight against it. So a few years ago, we were sending those really awful emails out. And what we saw over the last couple of years was the conversion rates at the top of the funnel and throughout the funnel really, really got pretty poor. I mean, we were, I want to say 2015, about every 10 opportunities, 1 out of about every 10 opportunities would close. And that number was substantially worse by mid 2019. And so we had this is back when I took over marketing again. We invested really heavily in just cleaning up our communications, being more generous in our outreach, and focusing more on adding value back into the back end of the funnels. And conversion rates are now higher than they've ever been throughout the entire pipeline. Now the market that we're in is, we're manufacturing is going digital. We're in COVID right now. Everyone's had to go digital. The market is friendly to receiving help in terms of going digital. But even so, you've got to rise above the noise. You've got to add value. You've got to give people a reason to actually want to communicate with you. And we've seen the conversion rates go up significantly by focusing on those things.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the usual mindset of SDR leader or VP of sales is that takes more time. And so I cannot outreach to 1,000 people. It's mainly only maybe 100 or 50 or whatever, but in the end, if the bottom line is more and the interactions are better and you make more money, it's not only about the top of funnel. Yeah, it's also about focusing on what helps you drive the right people through the funnel.
Yeah, exactly. And depending on the business that you're in too. I mean, there's a company called Viva Software Systems that sells to pharmaceutical companies.
I know.
They have, I don't know, 1,000 customers. They don't have 100,000 customers. They've got like 1,000 customers, and they've got, they're a giant company, right? I mean, what are they worth? Tens of billions of dollars. They've got a couple billion in subscription license revenue, really high gross margins. I mean, it's just an absolutely stellar business. But they're only of 1,000 customers, right? It's not like the world has 100,000 pharmaceutical companies. And that's kind of akin to the business that we're in. I mean, there's not 5 million manufacturers in the world, right? And if you look at manufacturers at scale, manufacturers that have at least 50 million a year in sales, there's not 500,000 of them. So on some level, if you're building an enterprise business, if you're, a B2B enterprise company, it's not a numbers game where you're just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks the way you are with a consumer business like a Google or whatnot. At some level, if you're an enterprise company and you're targeting a particular market, you've got to make a lot of the shots that you take, and you've got to be winning a good section of the market over time. And there's not an infinite number of new leads you can put into the top of the funnel. So when somebody in sales might say, whatever, 100 accounts is not enough accounts for me to hit my number. Another point of view is, well, 10 accounts should be enough accounts for you to hit your number. It's just a matter of working a little harder, right, on those 10 accounts. And the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But yeah, I think if you're playing a numbers game where the shots, the value of the shot hitting is very high, then it's absolutely worth putting in that effort to increasing the chance that the shot is going to hit.
Absolutely agree. Let's go back to the one example that you gave about the CEO community. How did you set it up and start it, and how did it change during COVID?
Yeah, well, the timing was extraordinary. So I hired Molly Schoenthal, who was one of the folks who ran global digital at Mars Corporation, was an executive there. And she came to Salsify and is a consummate networker and knows lots of other VPs of e-commerce and manufacturing from lots of companies. And so in 2019, we started running experiments of could we have little events that e-commerce leaders would get together and do something fun and then trade notes with each other. One event, for example, is we arranged for a bunch of VPs of e-commerce to get a tour of an Amazon fulfillment center. Another one is we picked 5 experiential retail locations around Soho in Manhattan. And we did a tour of those 5 locations, including getting the founder of Showfields Mall to show us around Showfields and stuff like that. And so the people would come and they got the tour of those facilities and can talk about it. And people were really, it became clear that people were really interested not in the events, as cool as the events are, but they were really interested in just talking to each other. You know, this e-commerce thing for manufacturing is so new that no one's really quite figured it out. Everyone's making it up as they go. And the value of interacting with peers was seen as really, really high. The value of the events was seen as, you know, fine, right? And so coming into 2020, we thought, geez, you know, we should just focus on a peer community here because they're hungry for it, and this would be really helpful to them. And we'll do it at our expense. And we think that if, just in the way that a rising tide raises all ships, if folks are getting together and trading notes, big picture, and we're the ones that are doing the connecting, we'll win, they'll win, everybody will win. It'll be great for everybody. So we were going to do our first in-person event with a heavy networking focus in New York City at the end of March.
Okay.
And obviously that didn't happen. And so what we did was we immediately pivoted and said, we're going virtual. And Molly just did an exceptional job at this. Molly changed the entire program around from scratch, re-envisioned what it would be like if it were fully virtual, and relaunched it right in the middle of March. And it's just been hugely successful. I mean, she got a mix of guest speakers, and she got a really, really excellent core of a couple dozen executives to start off with. And people found it so valuable, they started inviting other peers from other companies to come join. And that's how we got it started. So we created something for which there was a really detailed need in the market that became clear to us in 2019 from some of the experiments that we were running. And then we just invested in it to get the flywheel going. And now it's self-sustaining. Now, actually, the interesting thing about it is we've handed off the directive of that community to the community itself. So the community itself has a board of directors that directs what the community events are going to look like, and what the rules of community engagement are, and how often they get together. And so for us now, we don't really have to invest that much energy anymore. It's them running it on their own behalf. And so we've gotten to that point. And so now we're thinking, well, what other communities can we spin up? So we're in the middle of spinning up a CIO forum where CIOs at manufacturers get together and talk about digital shelf transformation and systems rebuilds and stuff like that. We're starting up a community for practitioners. So we've been focusing on executives, you know, VPs, chief digital officers, CMOs, CIOs. But there's a lot of directors out there that are doing all the grunt work, and whose teams are doing all the grunt work. They want to talk to each other too. And so can we create a space for them? So, ultimately each one of these communities is going to follow that same type of model where we start small. We start with a dozen or a couple dozen people. We add value, and ultimately we want these communities to be self-generating, to be able to run themselves. And I think there's a lot of potential for that.
If I were now the CIO of a company, and you just kicked off such an event, how would it work for me? So I get an invitation, and is it like an online a webinar, or is it like a Zoom call, or how can can you explain it? Because it would be interesting to learn how you do it, how you spin it off.
Yeah, so we they're all on Zoom from that perspective. So logistically, it's relatively simple. For each of the communities, they're interested in different things, right? For the VPs of e-commerce or CDOs, they really were just hungry to meet each other and to trade notes and see how other companies are operating. And so that was relatively easy. All we had to do was create a space where that was possible. For CIOs, the needs are a little bit different. There's some CIOs have that type of perspective, but a lot of them are interested in knowledge gathering, right? And so for the CIOs to jumpstart it, we're jumpstarting it with a set of speakers, folks that are expert in various areas of technology that are giving presentations, and that can seed topics for people to communicate with each other. We haven't yet got to a place where that forum is as share out focused as the e-commerce forum, but it's a different community. I think it'll get there eventually. And so if you're a CIO, why would you come? Well, you would come because the topics and the speakers and the peers that are coming are really interesting to you. It doesn't cost you anything other than your time. And the forum has an exclusive membership where if you do come, you're committing to engagement over a period of time. So, and the reason that you're willing to do it is because you know probably somebody who's done it and who's found value out of it. And so for us, that works because you're talking about dozens of people at the level of CIO. You're not talking about thousands of people. And so you can really do the bespoke value setting on almost an individual one-on-one basis on small numbers. And so, just I mean, for context, Salsify has 800, 900 customers at this point, and we've raised over $250 million. We've got offices in Boston, Chicago, London. Our European headquarters is in Lisbon and Portugal. I mean, we're a material company, but we're talking about community forums that have 20, 30, 50, 80, 100 people, right? And so a lot of these things, the numbers can be small, but the impact can be big. So when you ask, like, why would a CIO come? When you're talking about a group of 30 people that are CIOs from $1 billion plus companies and a topic that would get them interested, we can really zero in on something that'll work there.
That's amazing. And what I like a lot is that it's almost like a startup in a startup. Huh? So you have to test your way towards success, and you don't build a fancy platform or buy something super expensive. It's Zoom. So you start with Zoom and a community, and then you build it from there. So amazing, really cool.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, I'm a software provider, so I understand the irony in what I'm about to say, but there's fancy software solutions that you can buy to solve almost any problem. And I personally don't like spending money on software until I've proven that I can solve the problem and understand the problem enough to be even able to evaluate the software, if that makes sense. So most of these things, like if I wanted to go out and buy a community management platform, which, it's a category of software that does exist. And if I wanted to do it in Q1 2020 before having done any of this stuff, what the heck would I even be buying? What would I need it for? How would I measure its success? Who would run the thing? And so on and so forth. So we're now a year into this, 2 years if you count the early experiments that we're running, and we're only now getting a thesis on what scale might look like in this world, and only now getting to a point where I think we could start thinking about buying confidently. And so yeah, I think in my view, and this is generally true of my view of tools, is that the tool doesn't solve your problem. You solve your problem, and then the tool helps you accelerate or scale, right? And so that's where I'm at. But yeah, we generally won't buy the tool until we do those things.
That's great also for me to hear, because for us it's almost the same. So we are a super small startup, but we first basically built a raw version with Google Sheets of what we do, and it worked. And now we build the software for this. It's a similar line of thought, and it's amazing to see that you can and should maintain this line of thought even if you're really growing fast, and I mean you're big and really successful. So it's cool. It's a kind of mindset that you can employ, and that you should keep, apparently.
Yeah. Well, look, we're in B2B marketing, right? There's 1,000 software tools that you can buy, right? Or 10,000. I mean, it's the MarTech stack is ridiculously complicated. And you talk to, I'm in this CMO group with the Warburg Pincus team who led our Series E, and everybody has an ABM software that they've bought and sits on the shelf, or has bought or sat on the shelf. Everyone's got these stories of software that they buy, and it sits on the shelf. And so, yeah, I think that the mentality of really dig at the problem on your own for a while before you look to buy software, I think is an important one and a good one, a good habit to be in.
Great. We already through. That was super efficient and fast. I'm surprised. But we got through all the topics we discussed. We are on time. That's amazing. And amazing, especially because I'm half Tunisian, so they're usually not on time. So we come to our 5 rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So we already talked a little bit about it, but I asked the question anyway. What do you do to keep body and mind fit and sharp?
Exercise every single day, and I sleep at least 8 hours every night.
I love to hear that, because this whole, I was a management consultant in my previous career, and it was like cool to work long hours. And I thought it's absolutely crazy. Doesn't make sense. If you're paid to think, you should have good sleep. So I love what you say. Your favorite business book?
It's not exactly a business book, but I think it's the most important business book written in a long time. It's Deep Work by Cal Newport.
Mm-hmm. Great. Your favorite business leader you are following?
Ben Thompson from Stratechery. He writes a blog called Stratechery. He's out of Taiwan. I think it's the most thought-provoking, smart technical strategy writing that there is right now.
Cool. Who should be our next podcast guest?
Man, you know who I would love to hear you talk to? There was a guy that was on our board of directors for a little while when he was at Northbridge, Rick Fulop. Rick founded Desktop Metal, which was just taken public this year via one of those SPACs. Rick is just an absolute master of a type of hype marketing that I'm not particularly good at, and he's absolutely incredible at. And there's different marketers that have different types of strengths, right? Like a David Cancel or a Rick Fulop has this ability to do hype that is rare. And especially, I mean, where we are in the East Coast of the US at Salsify, there aren't that many people that do that very well. It's more of like a West Coast thing to do the big hype. And so a guy like Rick or a guy like David Cancel would be just awesome to get on the podcast.
Thanks a lot. And what you say is interesting. It reminded me of a founder I know. He said, there's no one way to success. It's also usually whatever fits you in the founding team. So yeah, maybe there could have been a totally different path for Salsify, but that's what your strengths are, and that's how you are successful. So that's what's working for you. So last one. You can directly address our audience, and is there anything they can help you with?
Anything that they could help me with?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Well, we are looking to do a lot more marketing in Europe this year. And we're looking to expand the marketing team in Europe this year. So we've got our go-to-market headquarters is in London, and our support and services and general overall company headquarters in Europe is in Lisbon. And our focus has mostly been in the UK and in the Nordics. So anyone who's got experience taking a software product to the rest of Europe, especially if it's an enterprise software product, and has experience doing that and wants to talk, I'm all ears. So
someone you want to hire, so to say?
Possibly hire, possibly just, if it's a CMO that's done this, that's willing to catch up. I would love to talk to anybody who's doing that. It's a big part of where my focus area is this year is expanding the team and expanding the company in those directions. I think we're doing a lot of the right things, but the more that you can talk to peers who have been there, the more that you can anticipate potential landmines or areas where you need to over invest more so than you might think, based on spreadsheet math. The earlier you can learn those things, the better off.
Yeah, I love it. And Europe is definitely different than the United States. That's what we also
It is,
learned.
yeah. Well, it's funny. I lived in the UK growing up for a number of years, which isn't exactly Europe, but yeah, it is. It's a lot more different than I think people generally appreciate.
Mm-hmm. And where can people get in touch with you or reach out to you?
I am on LinkedIn. I'm Rob Gonzalez. I'm a bald guy, so if you're searching for Rob Gonzalez and you find a bald guy, I'm there. That's generally the easiest place to get in touch.
Perfect. And I envy your haircut. We have absolute lockdown here in Germany, so I couldn't get a haircut for a couple of almost month now. So I don't want to take my headphones off. That looks crazy. Thanks a lot. That's it. Amazing talk, a lot of insights. It was a pleasure to have you as a guest, Rob.
Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Cool. No, it was really, I mean it. It really was a pleasure. I learned a lot. And it's also going into the notion that we have as a company, as a super small company, but focusing more on providing value. It's like good karma. It always works somehow, and you have to invest more. But yeah, you build good relationships even with the people that may not buy in this instant, and that just pays off. So I love your attitude here.
It's the long game, you know.
Absolutely. And I don't know a CMO on the top of mind, but I know some people who might know someone. So I'm going to see if I can find someone who is an expert who's done this in all over Europe. Once you have a team in place, I mean, we are super small, but at least we have experience in DACH, so Germany, Austria, Switzerland. So I could give you some insights on this German-speaking mindset, because that's where we also had some smaller ones, so not as big as you, but also SaaS companies grow and get in touch with the leaders. So just if you have someone, you can connect them. I give them some tips, and I look if I find someone, and then I just reach out to you, ask if that person is relevant, and then I connect you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I've got my SVP of product of growth strategy is out of London. He actually starts on Monday.
Cool.
So I may be in touch once he gets ramped a little bit. We're going to have a much heavier focus going into the year.
Oh, amazing. So keep on the growth. I love what you're doing. I love your story. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you're going to stay successful. And COVID is, I mean, for companies like yours, it's a blessing, even though it's not good for the whole world. I think it's catapulting you into the future, and you are the future.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much. This has been great. Can you send me an email when the podcast goes live, and I'll share it in my feed.
Absolutely. We also gonna make some content snippets that we create available to you and your team, so you can also use it for whatever you want to use it for.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Rob.
Well, Sammy, anytime, man. Good to talk to you, and be in touch soon. Happy New Year.
Yeah. Happy New Year. Bye.